All right. Thanks everybody for coming, and thanks for the introduction, Scott. Today we are going to talk about roles in relationships, and this is continuing that thread that we've been talking about the last couple weeks. Areas where there's shared meaning and shared connection. So I think understanding the roles that roles in relationships play in our relationships it's pretty paradigm shifting, because normally when we assess how is this relationship doing for me, or do I feel accepted, we look at my person, the whole enchilada. Do you accept me for who I am? Which I would say is important, and maybe one of the most important attributes to have in a relationship. However, it's also the truth that just about any relationship you're part of, it exists because there's work to do together. So if that's a marriage, the work to do together may be to raise children or to maintain a household. If you're part of a team at work, or you work for an employer, you have the roles that you have in order to get some jobs done. So as much as the existential part of relationships is where we might want to focus and where we might want to feel accepted, we spend a lot of our time doing work in relation to our relationships, fulfilling roles outside of our relationships. And so we're going to talk today about the in the roles that you play in life, and maybe some paradigms for approaching a partner you might feel some disconnection on, some paradigms that will help you to connect around the roles that you each play. So this feeling accepted in your roles, it's important to feel accepted in the roles you feel in your relationship. I would say it's also important to feel supported and accepted by your partner and by the people you're in close relationship with in all of the roles you play in life. When it comes to roles are different. The roles we play are different than the people that we are. So one of the roles I play is husband, but that is not my identity. One of the roles I play is father, but that's not my identity. I also play the role of therapist, and that's not my identity. Each one of those roles, I put a lot of me into it, but at the end of the day, I can remain the person that I am and not play that role. And so it's important for you to be able to identify the roles you're playing in a relationship. And so the roles you're playing in a relationship and the roles your partner plays in the relationship, and to separate that a bit from who that person is. Because the support you can give to those roles, I think we're better equipped to give support when we're not looking at the person as the whole enchilada, but the job to be completed. It gives us a little more of an accessible win. So a lot of couples, a lot of relationships, they can have gridlocks on this issue. And it usually comes down to, we hold different values as a lover, as a partner, as a worker, as a friend, as a family member. And when we don't share the similar values, it's really easy to resent and judge one another in how we see each other fulfill those roles. It's easy to feel unappreciated or disrespected, and therefore there's fights on how these roles are lived. The most direct way to address the conflict in how those roles are lived is to talk about these as roles we play. So for example, something I see in my office all of the time in couples is the betrayed partner will say something like, "It's really hard for me to be excited about the progress you think you're making in recovery, because I'm still hurting very badly." In situations like that, partners in the relationship are talking about two different aspects. So the addicted partner is saying, "I want you to recognize this role I'm playing as a recovering person, and I want you to value that role I'm playing." The betrayed spouse is saying, "As an individual, I'm wounded because of the role you played as an addict and because you betrayed me." And so there's this perpetual argument, or this perpetual disconnect, because the person who you are can't value the role that I play. And so bringing it back to the roles we play, at the end of the day, while betrayal hurts badly, your identity as a partner who's been betrayed is not, your whole identity is not a betrayed partner. You are the person who you are, who has been betrayed. At the end of the day, the identity for the person who's struggling with addiction is not, I am an addict and that's all there is to me. Right now, I'm playing an addict in recovery role because that's the work that's required in our life, in our relationship. So the disconnect in those values is often the difference between how differently you see where you are and where your partner is, and how you judge where both of you are supposed to be. So essentially, the difficulty comes in judging how each other are doing in playing the roles that we've been assigned, or the roles that we've chosen in this scenario, rather than talking to the person you're in a relationship with about the role they find themselves playing, how they think about it, how they feel about it, what their expectations are. And as in all things in relationships, once we reach understanding, we then can move to something like a compromise, or something like a negotiation, or something like, let's see if we can configure this where both of our core needs and values are met. And we can drop the fight, because the fight really is missing the point. So it's important in your relationships, whether it's your romantic relationships or in the workplace, know which roles you play that generate the most conflict for you. And it's important to be able to isolate those roles and to address the issues that come up in those roles one at a time. Because otherwise, when we try to address every aspect of every role all at once, it's easy to get the wires crossed with the person that I am and the role that I play. So folks who are in long-term recovery really understand this through that maxim, one day at a time, or one problem at a time. This is a lifelong pursuit, becoming accustomed in these roles, learning these roles, becoming good at these roles that we play. So in my opinion, incremental process is not only the reality of how it works, it's also kind of the gold standard for change that lasts a long time. And that's hard when we go back to this situation, or this example of the betrayed partner and the addicted spouse who can't really appreciate where each other are at, and praise that, because there may be a really core need that is difficult to honor in each other. Some of that compromise, or some of that, and I see this shake out in long-term recovery, usually the addicted individual is ready in their recovery to move on from a sole focus on sobriety and abstinence. Usually they're ready to move on to that, from that, before their partner feels safe with them moving on from that. And so a compromise, after understanding the core needs and the roles that we play, may look like, I will keep sobriety and accountability a focus in my recovery by continuing work with my sponsor, going to my meetings, having check-ins with you, so that you can feel safer. I know that's important to you. I'll give that to you. My hope is that you'll work to understand that this isn't always going to be my biggest struggle. And sometimes I need to focus on feelings, or I need to focus on my relationship with my job, and some of those more existential questions and my anxieties. The golden question at the end of those seeking understandings and compromising is, how can I honor and support you in the role that you have to play right now, or the role that you're choosing to play right now? And you see how in that question, it really shifts the entire dynamic around the conflict. It shifts it from this is our role, or this is our work, to this is your role, this is your work. And at the end of the day, you're going to be the person who gets the work done. How can I best support you in doing that? And that, like most of these connections, these shared meanings, there's a bit of risk involved in really moving in close to your partner, and really getting to that supportive place, or that, tell me about the meaning and how can I support you in that, because there's trust that has to be extended there. At the end of the day, and I hear this from a lot of the addicted folks that I work with, my spouse is holding on to this, and why aren't they doing X, Y, Z? And to me, that's an example of trying to define your partner's role rather than understanding how they're experiencing the role that you gave them. the role that they are finding themselves in and learning what that means for them. Could you imagine in your workplace if instead of applying for a position, you were interviewed based on your expertise and your strengths, and your employer said, we are going to find a place in this company where you can thrive and you can give the very best contribution that you're capable of, and you'll be proud of the work that you do every day. How different would that feel from, we need you to make this widget and sell it for this price, and we don't really care about anything else. In our intimate relationships, we often try to operationalize it like that. Well, I want you to XYZ and that's all I want from you, versus who are you really and how are you experiencing your life? And if that's something that I can get on board with enough, again, that golden question is, how can I support you in your role? Because at the end of the day, again, that existential, who I love, who I am, I think those are all good places to spend some time. But at the end of the day, I think we get most of our feelings of worth and accomplishment from the roles that we play. We find most of our purpose in life by the work that we're engaged in. To me, it's kind of those, we get to vacation in that existential, I feel fulfilled, I feel happy, but most of the time it's the work we're accomplishing. So think about some of the relationships you're in, whether these are recovery relationships, your marriage, your partnership, even where you work, and think about a couple of things. First is, what are the roles that I'm playing and what's the grief I have with them? What are the roles that others are playing in relation to me? And how can I offer support and encouragement, or how can I seek understanding so that I can offer better support and encouragement for the roles that people around me are playing? So that is roles and how they affect our relationships.
Thanks, John. So you kind of addressed this, but a little bit. Right there near the end, you said, we should ask, how can I honor, support you in the role you're choosing to play right now? And then you talked a little bit about trying to force a role onto somebody. But what if I, need you right now to drop your role as recovering addict and pick up your role as parent? Because, how can I express my need for you to play a different role right now when you want to go to your 12-step meeting and I really need you to take the kids to, their ball game?
Yeah.
Or whatever the conflict is. How does a couple, work around, I understand you're in this role right now, but I really need you to be in this one. Or would like
Yeah.
you.
Yeah. Navigating issues like that are so common in recovery and so common with couples. And I think like many issues, this is one of those that if we have a pre-conversation or a pre-understanding, if we can make that part of our vernacular, hey, we play roles, and there's not just one role you play that helps get the work done of our coupleship. I really value the role you play as recovering addict, because that provides so much, that can provide so much confidence for me, that can provide so much safety. There are some times though where I'm going to value the role that you play as parent or as like co-chauffeur or whatever that is. I'm going to value that more than your role as recovering addict. And we need to be able to talk to each other. And just because I'm asking you to play a different role doesn't mean I don't think the ones you're leaving are unimportant. That's about my need, not a commentary on how you're doing. And so again, in these pre-conversations, if the culture of the relationship is, you're the one in the role, you understand it best, I will learn from you. When I'm in my role as parent and I'm feeling lonely and saying, hey, I need you to pick up that role as co-parent, I need you to pick up that role as parent, and show up a little more. It's just like if you were, I'm building a deck in my backyard right now. So when I turn to one of my kids, or I turn to my spouse, or they turn to me and say, hey, I need this, it's not, you were asleep on the job, you should have known this. It's, we're playing this role, I need to communicate to you about how you can support me best. Or there may be some aspects of your role that are hard for you to understand if I don't communicate to you about the role that I'm playing. So you see how there's kind of that layer of detachment from self. It's not stop being this person. It's, for now, can you push pause on that? And can you just help me logistically for a minute? And when it's put in those terms, and the understanding is we are going to need things from each other, it can become a matter of just a simple request and response. Yes or no, I'm able to do this. And also recognizing when, think of the roles that are important to you that you play that maybe nobody else quite understands, but when they show up and support you in that. I'm thinking one of my spouse's good friends in college, he was really into kabuki theater, and it was very, very important to him. And we went to one of his shows, and this will speak more to my cultural ignorance than to the quality of the production, but I'm watching this very traditional kabuki theater. I'm thinking, what is this? I feel so uncomfortable. I don't know what's going on. I don't get this. And this was probably the second time that I met him. And I think he gave me one of the biggest hugs I've ever been given in my life. And he said, "Thank you so much for coming. This means so much to me." And as I've gotten to know him over the years, that wasn't pretense.
Yeah.
I showed up and supported him in a role that I didn't fully understand. And it was a huge deposit in that relationship. And oftentimes in our intimate relationships, that's how supporting each other in the role goes. I may not understand this role that you're playing, but when I show up and support you in it, that's a huge reach. And that may be more about what we're about giving each other is, can I reach and show you that I'm considering you and that I care about you? Not, are we on the same page and have the same understanding and the same feeling all the time?
Have you been back to kabuki?
I haven't. He moved out of state. He moved out of the country. He went and lived in Japan for a long time. But if he actually, they moved back. If he were to do another show, I'd go back.
There you go.
Yeah, and I'd probably sit down with him afterward and say, "Explain this to me."
Yeah, I've been wondering for 20 years. Mm-hmm. Okay, let's take some questions. The first one that popped up came in on our chat feature, so I'm going to take this one first, and then we'll go over to the Q&A. Hi guys, for an addict who is engaged in drugs, masturbation, massages, prostitutes, and affairs, will a period of total abstinence help? And if so, for how long? We have heard 30 days, 60 days, and 90 days on Seeking Integrity channels.
Yeah, so there's a little bit to pick apart here. First, I think you have to determine, or you have to be willing to look at some of these behaviors. Is it a good idea for me to put them back on the table at all? When I'm a person in recovery, can I recreationally use drugs? Can I recreationally get sexual massage? And so that's something with a sponsor and with a therapist to determine, I would say, as you're preparing to really lock down on sobriety, to get it very clear what your expectation is and what you will be trying to reintegrate later on, and what you're leaving forever. So as far as time periods for abstinence goes, I think that 30, 60, or 90 days are thrown out there a lot because they're convenient periods of time. That's how we measure the passage of time. That's 1, 2, or 3 months. I tend to be a lot more competency or needs focused in recovery than goal or accomplishment focused. So for example, take the issue of masturbation. For a lot of the sex addiction clients that I work with, at some point in their recovery, it comes up, is this something I'm going to be reintegrating in a healthy way, or is that a goodbye forever thing to me? And what a period of abstinence does, I'll often say to my clients, anytime you stop running from something, you'll discover why you were running from it. So if masturbation is something that you've been using to compulsively numb out, if you stop masturbating for 30, 60, or 90 days, in any one of those time periods, you'll discover more about why you used this and how you used it. The insight alone is not sufficient to say, okay, now I can go back to it. I think we really have to look at, do I have clarity of mind? Am I still activated around this issue? How is my life without this compared to my life with it? And so again, it's those 30, 60, 90 days, I think they're arbitrary time periods, and they're more like an accountability piece or a commitment. I'm going to give myself this amount of time, and then I'm going to be looking at where I'm at now. What did that do for me? And what are my needs continuing? I've worked with couples before on like a sex fast and abstinence period. And there was one couple, it was one of the most surprising things in the world to both of them. They agreed initially on a 60-day sex fast, and they got to the end of it, and both of them looked at each other and said, I think we need more time on that. There's so much that's coming up, and it's actually been really good for us to have, like, there's other things we're talking about in our relationship. Now that we have this off the table, I would like more time here. And they hadn't talked to each other beforehand about that. So for me, the key is with any of those abstinence periods, as you get to the end of your commitment, talk with a trusted other, a sponsor, a therapist, a support group, about what you're experiencing, and determine what your next steps are. That's kind of the pattern for all recovery, not I will forever forward. It's what are my needs now? It's getting to a point where we're flexible and aware enough. What are my needs now, and how am I going to attend to those in a healthy way?
Yeah, and as Jonathan said, this period of time. It doesn't matter so much how many days it is. What matters is that you get some clarity about what's working in your sex life and what isn't. And for most sex addicts, the big question is masturbation. Is it a bottom line behavior for me, or is it a middle circle behavior, or maybe is it part of my healthy recovery? Usually it's either a bottom line behavior or middle circle behavior. And it takes some time away from it for people to really get some clarity about, is masturbation part of my disease or not? Or, it always is part of the disease really in a sex addict, but, how big of a part, what role does it play, and can I set up boundaries around it and still do it? So yeah, you just need some clarity. So it's not a matter of 30 or 60 or 90 or 120 or whatever. It's a matter of getting some clarity. But working with your therapist and sponsor while you're doing
there's
that.
there's nothing magical about those time periods, and you can white knuckle for those time periods too and have very little change happen.
Yeah, a lot of people white knuckle for 30 days and then they just go nuts after the 30 days. It's like, oh, that wasn't the point. But so, and a lot of people, I had a sponsee who had the same experience that John's clients did, decided, what, we're not ready to move forward yet. Let's extend. They went like 9 months he was totally abstinent. She was allowed to, masturbate or do whatever she wanted because she wasn't the addict, but they didn't have sex with each other, and he was completely abstinent for about 9 months, and he was surprised he didn't explode somehow. But nobody ever died from lack of sex. I'm sorry, that's just the truth. Okay, what would be the criteria for a mother enmeshed man? Let's just stop right there and let you answer that.
Yeah. So with enmeshment in general, the things that we look for are relationships where there's a bind of guilt and obligation. That's the main currency or the main attachment to the relationship, rather than love, rather than commitment, rather than I'm choosing this and you're choosing me. It's relationships that are built on duty, guilt, and obligation. So with a mother enmeshed man specifically, generally what we'll see is he doesn't necessarily have to be close to his mother. I've worked with a lot of mother enmeshed men who haven't talked with their mothers for years, but his psychological and emotional world orbits around her and her needs. At the exclusion of, I would say most importantly, the self. So the man himself, he can't focus on his own needs and his own way in the world because he's so focused on caring for the needs of this parent. And secondarily, the spouse and the love relationships that he's trying to choose. Mother enmeshment can be marked by a lot of ambivalence and a lot of inability to keep commitments. And there's a couple of different psychological reasons for that, which we won't get into, but it's essentially like shorthand. The relationship and the identification with the mom is so big and so strong that it subsumes everything else. I'm working with a mother enmeshed man right now who, one of the things he's reckoning with, he's a very successful doctor. And he says, I love what I do, but the whole reason why I got into it is because growing up, my mom said, I will have a son who's a doctor and your brother's not capable. And she would tell him things in med school like, the only reason why you're getting through this is because I'm supporting you. And so part of what he's reckoning with is that I have this aspect of my life that I really love, and I need to get mom out of my psyche on that. I need to reconnect with this just on me, so I can feel like I'm really choosing this. So this really is my life. The mother enmeshed man is living mom's plan for him, not his own.
Yeah. And then the second half of this question is, the man I'm married to is very close to his mom. He was acting out with men sexually, but he doesn't identify as homosexual. There's not a question attached to that, but are those two things related or unrelated, or we don't know?
The short answer is probably not. That's I think an older paradigm of where same-sex behavior comes from, is there's something weird in the relationship with the mom. Not every mother enmeshed man acts out with other men, and not every man who acts out with other men but doesn't identify as homosexual is enmeshed with his mother. So they're very separate issues, and it's important to treat them as such. So that may even require like some different specialists or some different kind of intensive work to find out what's going on with each, and to be able to get the husband, in this case, get him supported in the ways that he needs.
Yeah, and just to add to that, the fact that he's acting out with men does not mean that he's gay. It doesn't even mean that he's bisexual. There's 100 different reasons attached to addiction and childhood trauma and a whole bunch of other things that could play into that. So, and the only way to find the answers that you're probably looking for is for him to do a bunch of work with a knowledge therapist.
Well said.
Okay. Let's see. During this next question, it's a long one here. It sounds like this was a disclosure after he did his 8th relapse to porn, which he lied about initially. He initially showed some remorse but little empathy. Said he wants me to be safe with him. So the questioner responded with things like, I feel unsafe when you lie, I feel fear and anger when you relapse, etc. His response was that she had told him he was a bad person, that she hated him, that her response was negative. She wants to know, how can she be supportive of his recovery when he's not able to support hers, or to understand the pain she's been in for 4 years?
Yeah. So here I go back to some of the roles that I talked about earlier. Ideally, of course, you would want your partner to support you in all ways, and to be able to understand the roles that you've been tasked with playing in all ways. That question, how do I be supportive when I'm not getting the support that I need? For me, it comes down to a question of, where's my compass point at, and how do I want to live my life? So that there requires some detachment from a role there. You may be this person's spouse, but if you look at this person as any other person in the world, or any other person you know who's struggling with something, how do you want to act and behave towards that person? Are you expecting reciprocation? In a partnered relationship, you should expect the reciprocation, and that should be the ideal. That may not be possible here. That's something I think to continue to sort out in marital therapy and individual therapy. So if you want to be able to support, it may be, how would I treat any other suffering human being, and can I give that as a minimum, and maybe disconnect from those expectations I need and needs that I have as your spouse right now, because I'm not sure if you can fulfill those. These are also really, really difficult situations, because I think it requires a level of emotional maturity to be able to give a disclosure, and then to stand in the emotions as they exist, not trying to alter them into something that's more comfortable for us. And I would say, outside of preparing to tell the truth, that is the most difficult part of disclosure, is getting to a point where the person who's giving the disclosure can recognize you're going to have real feelings about this, and those real feelings may hurt me, or they may be uncomfortable for me. But the goal is not from today forward, now everything's rosy. What disclosure actually does is it opens up maybe some of the difficulty and some of the ugliness that we have to process and we have to get into. So, my heart goes out to you that that part is hard to come by right now.
Yeah, this is one of the reasons I think we recommend that any kind of disclosure be done with a therapist present who can facilitate the response and could say, no, that's not what she said at all. She just said, feel safe, she needs this. She's not saying you're a bad person. She's telling you what she needs. And when that therapist isn't there, things can really go off the rails. So yeah, there's a follow-up here. And by the way, ask us questions, use the Q&A feature, the chat feature, preferably Q&A. We got a couple more here, but we'll get through these pretty quickly. So she let the husband know she would like porn blocker on the phone, net nanny, something like that. Transparency in his recovery and technology. So she wants access to his technology, which a good net nanny, you could get reports about what he's doing with this technology. And then some active trust building. He says he won't put on a porn blocker and will not show his technology because that's codependency and I'm not working my program. Okay. I feel very unsafe and very disconnected. Your thoughts? Please help with specific suggestions on how I can handle this. There's a lot there.
So one thing that I have grown to appreciate more and more in my work as a certified sex addiction therapist who works primarily with addicted men is how important it is early on to start working on their paradigm around their partner's betrayal. Because for a million reasons, he can and will bristle at any request that you make. I find when I work with those men early on to say, just even a basic understanding, this is part of what your spouse is going through, and I want you to consider their needs and their requests through this lens. So asking him to read something like Out of the Doghouse, and just, I can get where you're coming from not wanting to do this, but I feel like you may not be understanding why I'm asking for this. Would you read this book? And could we have a discussion around that? That's I'd say kind of a starting point and a litmus test. Honestly, it's difficult for me to have hope for a relationship long-term if empathy cannot start coming to the forefront, even just in a little ways early on in recovery. It's hard to come by early in recovery, but if it can't start coming to the forefront, even just in a little way, it is a very, very difficult row to hoe after that. So I think making the request that he, instead of listening to your words, will you trust me as I'm explaining this to you? Will you read this book written by an expert? And could we maybe discuss in a marital session your impressions of this, and maybe even dive deeper on some aspects of this so that I can help you understand a little more where I'm coming from. This isn't about control or codependency. I'm trying to establish safety. Unfortunately, and I see this in a lot of relationships, the last person we believe about our partner's experience is our partner. We may have an easier time getting it from a book or from a third party. So that's where I would suggest to begin on there.
Yeah, I mean, and I just want to address the codependency part of that. In Seeking Integrity and Sexual Relationship Healing, we don't even use that word. We don't like it.
It's a dirty word.
Because it's blaming and shaming of a betrayed partner whose only fault is loving an addict. And why is that a fault? We don't understand that. There's nothing wrong with caring for a person who has problems. And to call that codependence puts a label on you that's it's just not a very nice label. Now, the Codependence Anonymous, if you're going to CODA, and you're getting something out of it, by all means, keep going. Dr. Rob created prodependence, which is a much more positive term. It's grounded in it's a theory that's grounded in attachment rather than trauma. Codependency is grounded in trauma. You're probably with this person because you have some unresolved trauma and you're repeating it, and until you make changes, you're going to be stuck in a crappy relationship. So it puts all the blame on you. Ick. Codependence is about attachment. Hey, you care about this person for better or worse. That's great. Let's figure out how you can do it more effectively. And you end up doing the same work that you do with the old model of codependency, but it's just framed so differently. It's about setting boundaries and, things like that, which, I mean, just as an outside observer, clearly needs to happen, and he's resistant to them from what you've described. But yeah, if you haven't been going to our pro-dependence webinars, and I think you have been, I recognize the name here, then do, because betrayed partners get so much heat for just being a betrayed partner, and it's ridiculous. And then porn blockers, parental control software, filtering and monitoring software, whatever it is great, but it is not a guarantee of sobriety. If I was an addict and I still wanted to act out, I can work around it, or I can just go buy a new smartphone and that you don't know about.
I found with porn blockers specifically, I have some clients who I won't recommend them to because it's a game for them to get around it, and it almost creates another issue. I think they can be an effective temporary stopgap if the individual who's applying them is bought into it. I need the extra accountability. I need some extra hoops to jump through so that I can have some extra time to kind of think before I connect with action. But for someone who's resistant to that and is not bought into transparency, it becomes another place to hide and to undermine.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to skip back up to the question before this one. How do you know what your identity is? I'm going to assume this is sexual identity, gender identity. I don't know.
Yeah, I guess the simplest way to answer that is you have to try some things out. And I would say this goes across the board for identity, not just gender or sexuality. I think our bodies and our brains.
Discussion, yeah.
Sorry, what's that?
Oh, I realize this is a question about roles, not about sexual orientation.
Okay, because I was going to say I'm probably not qualified to speak on gender or sexual identity in this way. But our bodies and our brains, I think, have a mechanism that resonates or we feel resonance when what's happening outside of us matches who we are inside. And thought experiments are one way of kind of getting to that. Oh, if I had a choice between this music and that music, what sounds better to me? But allowing yourself to kind of experience and then mindfully feel, what did that do for me? How does this resonate with who I am? That's how we find identity. It's by getting involved in life and allowing ourselves to feel it. Identity, I think, also becomes formed and understood through relationships with others. Not that our identities come from relationships, but think about every relationship you have is another person holding a mirror at a different angle. And so as you interact with that relationship, you get to know a different part of you. You get to see a different part of you. I recently, it's my tradition every summer, I guess, I read or I listen to some kind of World War II history. And I recently listened to the history of a unit that was my grandfather's paratrooper unit, followed the end of the war, what this unit did. And so I listened to this book, and I found a recorded oral history that my grandfather had given about 10 years before his death. And I tracked it down in the Library of Congress. I got the audio files, and I'm listening to that and understanding where he came from and understanding what his life was like. And then fast forwarding that to the way he raised his children and the way that I was raised, that's also part of your identity, is what came before. Not that that determines all of it, but there's so many different aspects to that. There's who am I in this moment? What's my history? What's my skin color? What's my cultural background? There are so many different elements that get to identity. And these are all elements that are not connected to what I do, but they're connected to who I am because it came together this way. Who I am, and I didn't ask for it. This is just the way that the atoms and the cells arrange themselves in me and where that came from. That's all part of identity. So the short answer is explore it. And that's how you find out what it is.
Yeah, and I always think, for me, it's about when do I start to tick? You know,
Yeah.
when do I get excited? If I consistently tick and am interested and fascinated, then I'm probably doing something that's pretty close to my core of
Yeah.
who I am. And if I consistently dread doing something, that probably is not who I am. And it means I'm having to get out of my not necessarily my comfort zone, but my who I am zone and kind of stretch myself, and it's uncomfortable. Excuse me. I mean, you know, there's a comedian named Hannah Gadsby, and she's from New Zealand, I believe, and she's a lesbian, and she's a big old manly looking lesbian by her own admission, and that's part of her act. But she's gotten really famous in New Zealand, and there's on either Netflix or Amazon Prime, there's a special with her called Nanette, and I highly recommend it. But one of her jokes is that people always refer to her as the lesbian comedian, and she doesn't understand why. She spends a lot more time drinking tea with her mother than she does being a lesbian. And I was like, oh my God, yes, I totally get that. I mean, I'm a gay man, but I don't spend a lot of time being gay. I spend a lot of time working on the house and,
Yeah.
doing this. And, it's not really part of my core. It's a part of who I am, but it's not who I really am.
Yeah. Your identity is never one facet. It's never one thing. It's like trying to determine the value of a diamond by just looking through one facet. You can't get the full picture. And it's really your sexuality is part of it. Your gender identity is part of it. Your interests and your pursuits. And like, I love what you said, Scott, like how did you say it? What makes me feel alive? What makes me tick?
Yeah.
That's part of it.
Yeah. There's this. Yeah. Okay. Just got in the chat feature. Hannah Gadsby has another special called Douglas, and it's even better than the first Netflix. I will check that out. She's hilarious. If you're looking for some quarantine viewing, I highly recommend it. My husband and me, we are in a very conflict-riddled relationship. This is from the chat feature, John, if you're looking, because we are from different countries and he wants me to live overseas. I decided to move, but he just despises me and treats me coldly. His family doesn't treat me like family, and I feel alone. He does not want to do therapy. What should I do?
Very, very tough situation, and know that any advice I give is probably not including all of the nuance here. So I'll do my best to give you something that might give you kind of a general place to start. I think even when your spouse is bought into therapy and is bought into working things, the key question to ask yourself at the beginning and end of every day is, if nothing else changes in this relationship or in this person, how do I feel about it? Because we have no guarantee of change happening or things getting better. We may work at it and may even in the best of circumstances give it our best effort, but at the end of the day, we can't guarantee that a change will happen that makes the relationship tolerable for us. So that's the first question to ask yourself, is if nothing changes, how do I feel about this? Can I do this? And then from there, depending on what your answer is, there's other questions to be asking. So if the answer is no, I can't keep doing this, then the question is, what are my options? And those might be some things that you want to put on the table. I really like Scott was talking about codependence earlier, and other movements, other paradigms like that would say, you are going to love who you're going to love, and sometimes your task is to make that choice and make that love as positive an experience for yourself as you can. So your options may be, I'm really going to focus on self-development, and I'm really going to focus on being the best person that I can be in the circumstances that I'm in. You may say your option is to say, this is untenable and I'm not going to do this. And you may give an ultimatum, or you may say, if this is what it's going to be like, I can't keep doing this. And there's 100 other options there. If the answer is yes, I can keep doing this, even if it looks this way, I would refer you to the video we recorded a couple of sessions ago around gridlock on perpetual issues, and what it takes to overcome gridlock. I'll give you just a quick preview there. In order to not be gridlocked on key differences between you and your spouse, you need to be able to greet that issue with humor, positive affect, and curiosity. We can't do that with every issue that we don't agree with our spouse on, or everything that causes pain. But if we can, there are things in the relationship that we can live with. But that's the first question, is if nothing changes, how do I feel about this? But yeah, my heart goes out to you here. That's the despising and the treating coldly. I don't think those usually aren't relationship conditions under which anybody thrives or feels safe. So yeah. I feel for you there.
Yeah, there's actually Dr. Rob put a chapter in the Out of the Doghouse book, which it doesn't. I don't know if you're dealing with infidelity or not, but it's called "Should I Stay or Should I Go?" And there's a list of things that would keep you in a relationship. We have fun together. We have similar values. We're able to agree to disagree. We can respectfully disagree when, and, we have a lot of history, things like that. And, all of those things have to be weighed in as you make a decision about what should you do. And yeah, this is not a venue where we can dig deep and really do too much. So, but in a general way, yeah, what can you put up with? Let me ask you a question, John, that's sort of on a related topic here, because I actually see this all the time in real world relationships, is how much do the other person's friends and family matter, and how much do your friends and family matter in terms of our relationship working?
In terms of the relationship working, the existence of other connections outside the relationship, they don't have to depend on each other. Right. In fact, some of the work of the couples, individuals I work with is let's individuate and separate enough from those other relationships so you can really choose the relationship that you want and it can work. However, nobody exists is formed in isolation. So when you pick a relationship with one person, you are picking a relationship to some degree with a whole lot of other people that you wouldn't pick otherwise. And so that it can be a huge source of conflict in coupleships. And there's a couple of things that I see that help that conflict to resolve or help it to be manageable. And number one, if you're in a committed relationship, the correct answer to the question of who do you put first as a general rule is your partner and children that you have together. That's the correct answer. A relationship, a committed, intimate relationship will not work if your partner does not come high on that list. Yourself being the first person, but they're the first person outside of you that you put first. So once the orientation on that is clear, is we have to be each other's person, and we have to prioritize this relationship in order for it to work. Then we can look at some of the logistics. Okay, I know you really like spending time with this friend, but I do not like him in our home. So what are we going to do about that? And being able to have, instead of closing down into secrecy, okay, well, I'll keep these relationships, but I'm not going to tell you about it because it hurts you. We really have to move, I think, more into a place of maturity, where there can still be openness and discourse and not disdain. This is another one of those places where seeking understanding about what those relationships mean for the person who's in them. I was just thinking about this the other day. My wife has a really key relationship in her life, and I would not choose in a million years to be connected to this person. And we used to have a lot of conflict around it, because I would judge from my role how she was playing her role, and I would say, this is not good. You should stop. And it wasn't until I stopped and I really listened to, what does this relationship mean to you? And why is this important to you? She actually holds a lot of the same concerns that I have. And then she'll say, but I feel okay still investing in the relationship because this is what this relationship does for me ultimately. This is part of my history. This is part of how I feel grounded and connected to who I am. And as we've had more of those conversations and I've developed more of an understanding about what those relationships are for her, I actually value that individual. I still don't count them as my best friend, and I usually don't pick up the phone just to talk to them. But my hackles aren't raised the way that they were before because I've reoriented on that. So these extra relationships have a huge impact on the working of the relationship, but it's not insurmountable. We don't have to pick the perfect person with the perfect family and perfect friends in order to feel good.
But let me throw this one out. Let's say I've started dating someone, and I bring this person to a party to meet all of my friends, and all of my friends despise this person by the end of the evening. But I don't get it. Who should, I mean, is this a red flag? If I'm taken to this person's parents' house and the in-laws treat me like dirt, is that a red flag? Things like that.
Yeah, so the first scenario, I'd say maybe less of a red flag and more of a point of curiosity. Get curious. Ask about it. Love does cause blindness. And that's part of, I think, courtship is really asking some of those tough questions and examining things from all angles. When it comes to families, when it comes to in-laws, that is a red flag, but red flags don't necessarily mean don't dig here. Red flags mean exercise caution, be very upfront, make sure that if this is a known issue to you, make sure it's a known issue with your partner and that you two can have a partnership around this issue. But yeah, those can be really tough circumstances when you love the person that you're with and not their family.
Yeah. I mean, I one of the reasons I bring this up is with guys in recovery and anybody in recovery, we always say you don't get to date on your own. You need a support network to help you date, particularly if you're a sex or a porn or love addict, because you don't know what you're doing. Your picker is broken, you're off in left field, and you will not see 100 obvious red flags. Whereas your support network will say, he's still married and lives with his mother and is unemployed, and maybe you could do better, something like that. So yeah. Let's see.
Yeah, if you can't withstand the challenge of what do you see in this person, you may be in the relationship for other reasons than I really click with this person and this is where I want to be.
Or even like your wife, she had something that she was getting from that relationship that made it important to her. So you were able to say, okay, I understand that, and kind of let go of some of your hackle raising. But she was able to answer that question. And if you can't answer that question, what do you see in this person? other than, well, he or she is super hot. I mean, okay, beyond that, um, you know, because super hot only lasts so long.
Right.
So yeah, well, we've got a couple questions. We're out of time, so we're gonna have to cut ourselves off. Thank you everybody for being here.
Bring these questions back next week. The ones
Yes,
that we didn't get to.
yeah, I was just about to say, just save these, bring them back next week. We'll be happy to get to them for you, or 2 weeks from now. We'll be happy to get to them for you. So thank you, John. Thank you everybody for being here. Anything you want to recap or take us out with, John?
Just that golden question, how can I best support you in the roles that you're choosing? See what that does to shift some of that paradigm where you might have some grief with your partner in your relationship.
Awesome. Okay, thank you everybody. We'll see you in 2 weeks. See you, John.
Thanks everybody.